and of course, you will come again. So,
I hope so. Our conversations are never enough.
yes, and a never-ending process.
Yeah, because this is how we go in life, literally.
But tell me, we've had so many conversations. Is it too early or too late to ask, well, how do you pronounce your name?
Asmar,
No, Gabriela. How you say Gabriela or Gabriela? What do you say?
Gabriela,
Gabriela. Okay.
Gabriela.
Because I was
Yeah.
getting it wrong, and Danny said Gabriela, and I said I'll check with you because one of us is wrong. So okay, I'm wrong.
No, I mean, it really doesn't matter as far as I understand. It's me. So,
No, no, you have to get it right. We have to get it right. So definitely, now I've got it right. Gabriela.
yeah.
Great. So now today you're going to continue from where we left on the constellation part. That's it. That's what we're doing.
Yeah. I would love to be as didactic as possible and explain to you and to everybody how constellations work. And after that, first we need to understand how it works, not from an intellectual point of view, but from a very practical standpoint. And then, of course, how it connects to mediation, because it's our network here willing to understand more about mediation, about what can be useful in mediation. And that's exactly how I got to constellations. But I have to make a disclaimer first. Constellation is something that is so new to humanity. And on the other hand, it has always been there. It is a natural law. It is a natural capability that humans have and every living being has.
Yep.
But we are not used to letting this kind of sensorial information interact with our decision-making processes. We are not aware of it. It is there. It impacts everything we do, but we are not conscious about it. And then many times in mediation, in the mediation world, we hear about techniques, we learn techniques to deal with rationality or irrationality. But it's very important to understand how limited this concept of rationality or irrationality is. It's absolutely limited to the brain. And we are much more than that. So it is still not perfect as a term, but I would rather start from the differentiation between rationality, irrationality, and consciousness, unconsciousness. Because whatever is conscient is not only what is rational. We can be conscient that something is hot because we touch it and it burns our hand, for example. You don't need to think about it. Your body is doing the work for your brain. So it's this perception that the difference for me, and I'm not being academic here, and please let me know if whatever I say doesn't make sense to you. But my experience shows that between rationality, and consciousness, there is all our other intelligences that come into play. So consciousness and consciousness is not only about our intellectual intelligence. It brings to the table our physical intelligence, our emotional intelligence, and most recently, because that's when humankind started to pay attention to it, our spiritual intelligence. So it brings out the whole of us to the table. And the main feature that caught my attention in mediation when I first learned about it was this bigger equation in relation to the previous methodologies that we had access to deal with conflicts that were not only limited to intellectuality, to understanding, but to the law. And the law is such a small piece of reality. It can only touch a small piece of reality. It's inevitably ending in money or your right to go and come freely, right? But we are much more than that, and a human being can be functional in society, can have a good life and bring up good conditions to others to have good lives, or not, depending on factors that the law will never touch. So mediation was the first methodology that I got in contact with that brought to the table this wider human being, this wider human needs. And we could go much further in terms of not only quantitative data, but qualitative data. The qualitative, it's kind of doesn't sound good, but the qualitative quality of decision-making processes. Mediation is much more about quality than quantity, but it's absolutely fundamental for any decision to be sustainable, that the parties feel that this is the best possible decision, not only one more, right? So going on this line of thought, where mediation was already a huge evolution in terms of human possibilities confronting a conflict situation. During one mediation, I was dealing, which is normal in mediation, with a party that was in loop in the speech. So the person was caught up by its own emotional traps, and he couldn't get out of this cycle of going back to the same point over and over, no matter what dialogue tool I could use, no matter if I made very rational questions or more, how can I say, more sensitive questions. The person, he was just like very narrow-mindedly going back to the point where he was frozen in that relationship, the relationship that was in conflict. So I started to think, how can I help this person get out of this loop? Because through words, I'm not able to. So I had some objects in my purse, and I put them on the table, and I told him, can you please show me in 3D what you're meaning, what you're talking about? So I don't have those, I don't even remember what the objects were, but they were like a lipstick or a pencil, something like that, whatever, doesn't matter. I just put everything I had on the table, and I asked him to use those objects to design the image that he was referring to. So now I'll use these two little dolls just to give an example. So he was like, there were many, but I won't have enough hands. So he was like, oh, this person refers to this person. And when this person talks, this person kind of lowers his head in obedience. But when he turns to the side and talks to the other person that is there, then he feels that he is much better than the other, and so on and so forth. So once the person could look at what himself was saying and understanding and feeling that that was his representation of reality, I came in asking questions that were concrete to him, not to me, based on what he was showing, he was seeing. So I started asking questions about the consistency, the rationality, in the perception that was not rational, but his 3D representation was very clear about. So I said, but you told me that this person responds to this other person who reports to the other one, but what you're showing me here is not like that. And so he was like, he was in shock with himself, not with me. And that's the beauty of mediation. Everything we do is to reach to the point where the person can see herself, not us. And I found this simple way of helping him get in touch with himself, not to words that he would signify, that he would mean, and fill in boxes that he already had, but were not the boxes that I meant to be in with my words. So after that, I started using this kind of thing, and I started getting more sophisticated about. So when I got home, I arranged some objects that were light to carry in my purse, but were all the same, because I was very concerned about having objects where one element would not be more fancy or more have other meanings. I wanted things to be simple, so that what really matters was the consciousness brought up by the relational pattern of the parties. And of course, I have to make this very clear. I would only do that in private meetings with one party, never with them all together. So in another situation, I was mediating a couple that had been mediated twice before, with years apart. So when they first divorced, they had a mediation in the United States. And then 10 years afterwards, they had another mediation in Brazil. And years went by, and the relationship was every time worse. And they had children in common with a lot of issues to solve. So, and they just couldn't look at each other as a father and a mother. They would only look at the masks that they used to each other that were very violent. So they were defending themselves before they could even communicate with the other, even have the intention of communication. So it was very hard to build a dialogue on that. So in one meeting with one of the parties, I got my objects, my little objects, and I asked the person to design in 3D how, and it was a she before, how she envisioned a good family arrangement where the children could feel that they were at home with both parents, where the children could feel safe in each house, not feeling that they would be betraying the other one. And so, show me how this could work. And so she did her design of the family relationship in a good setting. And I asked her to take a picture. I took a picture. And I asked her if eventually I could show it to him. So I had another private meeting with him, and I asked exactly the same to him, and he did his design. So once I saw that they both could envision a solution that was pretty much the same, then I asked them to exchange the images. And once they saw everything in private meetings, of course, I would never do that to them one in front of the other. I didn't want to disarm them. I wanted them to feel that they could go to the field, face each other, looking at the same future. So once they accepted and I exchanged the images and they saw that the other one wanted exactly the same that they envisioned as possible and as positive, they were, it was like they turned on a different set of capabilities of communication, and then we went to a joint meeting. And of course, it was hard for them to communicate directly to each other. Initially, it was through me, but at least they were talking about the same objective. And then we rebuilt a relationship and the possible relationship. And then we started talking about solutions. It was never about them liking each other. It was only about them playing their different and complementary roles in their children's lives. So, and then I started doing that. One day I had another type of mediation about a family business, and the parties came in with completely different ideas of whatever a solution could look like. They didn't want to be in mediation. They were forced by a judge to be in mediation. And we started from a point that was very far apart, and we came to something that looked like an agreement. And at the last step to an agreement, the very last, they didn't close. They crossed miles and miles in negotiation and mediation that they were astonished with. I was even astonished with. Nobody thought we could make so much progress. And at the last step, they didn't close. So I spent weeks thinking about what I couldn't see and what I couldn't help them see. And again, and not again. And at that moment, I realized that what I had been doing in these other cases was very much like Constellation. And that specific case was the trigger for me to look for a Constellation training. I had experience as a client in Constellation. I don't know if I told you before how my first Constellation was. Did I?
I can no, tell us again. Tell us again. We'll maybe.
Okay.
Because I think you did, but let's hear it again.
Okay. So the first Constellation I ever experienced in my life, as a client, of course, was for the fear to talk in public. At that time, it was 2007. I was already a mediation for a long time, but I had a day job that was pretty much demanding. And mediation for me was a hobby, an ideal, something that I wanted to do one day with my life. But at this point in 2007, not only me, but me and my husband decided that if I had to invest my life to make a living out of mediation, that was the moment, because I had just married my husband, and of course he wanted to have kids, and of course I was always very workaholic. And he said, well, if you want to start something new, it has to be now before we have kids. And I said, yeah, you're right. So we made this decision, and I left my job in a multinational where I was a director for public affairs. And I started trying to make a living on something which market was unexistent in Brazil. Unexistent. There were conversations about mediation. We had a lot of influence from Argentina that started the mediation market and law and everything much before Brazil. And I had been to the United States years before when I fell in love with mediation, and I started doing everything I could there. But in terms of market demand, people willing to pay for a service called mediation, that was unheard of in Brazil. So I had to do something that not only built consciousness on mediation, but also paid me, because I had bills to pay as everybody. So I had to teach. The only thing that would pay in that time about mediation was teaching. And we had groups of people interested in becoming mediators in a more broad way, because mediation is useful to mostly every other activity you can do that involves other human beings. So basically everything. So we did these very eclectic groups, learning how to deal with conflicts, even if they didn't intend to be professional mediators. And then there were all these lectures and classes and that showed up, and I had to do. But nobody knew, only me and my husband knew, how stressful it was to me to talk in public. I always did what I had to do. If I was afraid, I would go afraid, but nobody would notice, but I knew. And when I got back home, I was a migraine of tension, but nobody knew. But I told myself, if I keep going like that, I'm gonna die, because it's too much. It's too much effort. So I learned about this new methodology, Constellation, that I had not previously heard about. And I said, why not? Let's try.
But Gabriela, what is really happening in your mind at that point of time? I mean, of course, it is something which is it gives you a lot of tension, and but it's a pressure to you for you to speak publicly. But what is really happening in your mind? Why are you overthinking about it? What's actually happening?
I had no idea. It was not rational. Rationally, my decision was always, if I have to do something, even if it's not comfortable, I will do it. If I would think about the reasons why it was so difficult for me to expose myself in public, I would clearly think about my father, because my father was a great speaker. He was a great lecturer. He was a politician, and I loved my father, admired him very much, but I didn't want to look like him. He was very litigious. He was a very successful lawyer doing litigation all the time. And in Brazil, the only cases that go to jury are crimes against life. So he would go to the public defendants and ask for one case a year, pro bono, a case of a murder or something, a crime against life, because he wanted to do a jury, because it was his hobby. And although I admired him a lot, litigation and fighting and this kind of adversarial movements didn't make any sense to me. I didn't want to be a litigator. And then there would be many stories why I went to law after doing engineering, and why in law, within the legal field, I chose something that was the very opposite of litigation. But anyway, so if I would rationalize about my fear to talk in public, it would certainly be related to my father, because the person that was closest to me that spoke very well in public was my father, and that was his very tool for litigation. And I didn't want to do litigation, I wanted to do mediation. But at the end, our rationality is inevitably wrong. Just because it's very rational. If we knew the cause, if the cause was really conscient, we would have solved it before it got to this point. Many times, the cause of some kind of pain in the body, in the soul, in the pocket, any kind of pain it's an alarm that something is out of place. So it's a warning, an early warning, or a late warning, depending on the stage of the situation, about something being out of place. And when something is out of place, your body needs to react before life becomes impossible. It's just like a physical symptom. But we feel this pain in different ways. Many times it's the same cause, but the reactions are different. Many times, what means something to one person means something completely different to another. And everything is all right, because we are unique. So it doesn't matter how much scientific we want to be. When we are talking about this, how can I say that? This attempt to survival, facing something that is so hard to see, that when we were not sophisticated enough to deal with that monster, we exiled the monster in the closet. And at that point, for a child, just the fact that she cannot see the monster makes her feel safe. There is no complexity in terms of how easy it would be for the monster to open the closet. If the monster is out of sight, I feel safe. That's how children work. That's why many times they hug a doll to sleep more comfortably, because they feel that they have company, right? So many of these behaviors we shape when we are very young to understand. It's not rational at all. We didn't have the rationality at that point. So if we could know the cause with our adult minds, we would already have solved it. That's logical. If we have not solved it yet, or if we have tried many times to solve a problem and we couldn't yet, it's inevitably because the cause is not within our eyesight reach. It's somewhere else where we cannot locate it yet. And the beauty of the methodologies that bring up this unconsciousness is that it doesn't only bring up whatever from this big closet where we have put our monsters throughout our lives. It brings up exactly what we are ready to see. And conflict is about this alarm system. It's exactly the alarm system in a relationship. Conflict is showing people all the time what is out of place in that relationship, what should be seen to be healed so that life could go on. And when we're not talking about just one person, one party, we're talking about many. What is happening there is not only related to that individual as a system, because we are always a system. Our body is a system, a very complex system. Our heart is a system. Our lungs are systems. And so when we think about the small part or the big part, and then we talk about a relationship between you and me that we're building now, or our original families, or our country, our nation, our our I forgot the word I want to use. Anyway, planet Earth, all the solar system, many solar systems. It doesn't matter how small or how big our lenses go. Systems are always working through relationships of the parties. And conflict is about something out of place in that relational pattern, right? And many times we represent something that is out of place in a bigger system in our small world. So it's common, happen so many times that I have someone coming to me as a mediator to ask me to mediate a specific conflict within a company, a corporation. And when I hear about the conflict that was brought up, and I ask questions to the right person, because it needs to be the interaction needs to be with the person who really has a legitimacy and a power over the whole situation, or is implicated directly in that situation. So many times when I do that, and I have the client's permission to constellate, and constellation is about bringing up this specific part of the relationship that was unconscious, that was obscure, and we bringing to light to understand, not rationally why, but to have this broader view of how these parts work together and how they could work better together when they are put in place in their own unique individual place. So many times when we do that, the conflict disappears. It's not magic. It's just organizing, not rationally, but sensorially, organizing each party in their place that was always meant to be, so that they can be their best. And once they feel in place, they don't need to be aggressive. They don't need to be proving themselves over and over against the other party. There is no against. In parties that were meant to be complementary, when we understand that we are complementary to each other, there is no need to destroy the other party physically, mentally, intellectually, whatever. So it's much more comfortable, effective, efficient to just go back to where we belong. And then conflict just, is not needed anymore. And it's not a miracle. It's something that is absolutely accessible to us all. So I ended up doing the opposite, which is normal. I first talked about the interaction of constellation and mediation. There's more to talk about, but then I'll leave it to the third chapter of today. And I wanted to make this space to explain a little bit of how it works if you want.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that okay?
Yep.
Okay. So science is not completely able yet to explain how the constellation really works, but science is walking fast to this goal, towards this goal. So the creator of Constellation, or the methodology, the person who baptized Constellation with this name, and it's good to understand this German man called Bert Hellinger. He was not the first one to start this development from scratch. He came after other people who were already using this perception of what is called the field in other kinds of methodologies. But he not only put a methodology together in a very effective way, but he spread out to the world how to use this methodology. And he was very, how can I say, very philosophical in terms of the understanding of the interactions within a system, a living system. So he organized some important understandings that we work with. So Bert Hellinger was doing a constellation workshop. I was going to say that. He was German. So the original name of constellation is Familienstellen. I don't speak German, but this word I understand. And Familienstellen could be translated as a family co-location, not constellation. But once translated to English, and from English to Portuguese and to every other language, it was translated as constellations, and there is a sense to it, because the constellations of stars, they are all about co-location. They are about the exact distance between one and the other that characterizes one group from the other, that differentiates one group from the other. So it is meaningful. But the trick with constellation as a word is that most people connect it to the zodiac or just something like that, or even to cosmology, and it has nothing to do with that. It's about, yes, this co-location, but among living beings, and the effect that this relational pattern has in the individual's behavior and the individual's ability to deal with life as it comes. So Bert Hellinger was doing his workshop. He was very phenomenological. So his approach to the phenomenon was, I look at it, I see what happens, and I deal with what happens. I don't need to ask questions why it happens, how it happens. It doesn't matter to me. I'm only dealing with whatever comes up. And I'm open to be there, to be fully present to whatever comes up, without previous formulas, without preconcepts, and etc. But in one of those workshops, a British biologist called Rupert Sheldrake, and he's still living, fortunately, and very active and very productive, building many things that are probably going to make science advance. He was there, and he understood that what was happening that in that phenomenon in the field was very similar to things that he was already studying. And he started with plants and then different kinds of animals, different species. And what the basis for Rupert Sheldrake's work was the question, the basic question that he asked was, what makes some behavioral features pass through generations within a species that matter cannot explain? So, for example, why do frogs and salamanders have the same kind of chemical structures, but once you cut off a piece of the salamandra, it regenerates and the frog doesn't regenerate? But if you give an electric stimulus to the frog, it will regenerate. So, in other words, why do the salamandras, why have they learned to look for the stimulation that they need to regenerate, and the frogs didn't learn the same, if technically they were able to? So questions like that made him do a lot of experiments. And another great example are the big groups of animals. For example, wolves. The wolves are born in a certain family, and if they get lost from their family, they will eventually find their original family. It's not just about being gregarian. They need to be with their original group. So even if years afterwards they are able to reach their family, I mean, they are always looking for their family, and eventually they meet their family. And many people thought that they had telepathy. And indeed, this is a kind of telepathy. This, at least it's a tool for telepathy, because it's a physical perception of an energy that is there and that connects all the members of a group. Another great example are the birds that fly together through miles and miles and miles, and the fish that the schools of fish, very tiny fish in absolutely enormous groups, and they never collide and they never get lost. How can you explain that through only the mental ability of these animals? It's just, it would be irrational to try to put some rationality in the small fish and the birds and the wolves and etc. So how do they develop this instinct, quote, to find each other and to go through life together in a very harmonic way? So Rupert Sheldrake, as a biologist, was studying that. And when he saw the constellation work, he understood that it was exactly the same kind of phenomenon. So at the end of the workshop, he went to Bert Hellinger, asked, do you know why it works like this? And Bert Hellinger said, I don't know why it works, I just know it works, and for me it's enough. Very German. And Rupert Sheldrake said, but let me explain. And so they started a relationship, and they became complementary in that understanding. So I don't, although I'm doing a training with Rupert Sheldrake right now, but I don't intend to explain in depth. The only point here is that science is still evolving to the deep understanding of the functioning of constellations. It is already proven that it exists and that it works. It is about what Rupert Sheldrake called morphogenetic fields. These fields are electric magnetic fields that connect members of a group. There is already a lot of experiments, a lot of studies to understand how we, as beings of X generation, how do we many times manifest in our behavior, in our choices in life, characteristics of someone that we may not even have known or heard about. Sometimes a great grandfather or a distant uncle or an aunt that for some reason in our generation is represented through a living member without any intellectual connection. It's only this connection through the field that at some point brings back the patterns that were not absorbed, quote, in that reality, in that the rich group of information where we are born in. So it's like, I would make a very, how can I say, a very difficult comparison, but it's like our cloud of information on internet. The groups are forming this collective consciousness from which they can they affect and they are affected by this rich network of information that has been formed before we were even born. But we are able to make downloads of what is necessary to our own path in life. So we never start from scratch. We always start from everything that was conquered before us. And when there is a pattern that was excluded, this pattern needs to be re-included so that the whole group can be in a healthy function. So on the other, from another point of view, it's like innovation and tradition. What connects a group, what connects a nation throughout time is tradition, right? Traditions are cultural features that we don't have to think about. When we were born, we learned that that was the right way, and we just repeat it over and over because that's how we learn, right? But when someone in that group brings up something different, innovation makes tradition shake. Tradition looks at innovation and says, no, you're dangerous. You're putting my life at risk because this is not what we are. We are this way. We have always been white, and you're telling me that you want to be green. How do you dare? So the green one many times is exiled from the group and lives isolated. But isolation is not what we were meant to be. We were not meant to be islands apart from each other. Even the islands have the sea to connect them. So this big sea of love, many times because of ignorance, is not able to deal with the green for some time. But then life goes on and keeps sophisticating generation after generation until the point that the then current generation is mature enough to look at the green and say, you belong. You can come in because now we are strong enough to love you the way you are. And then a descendant brings this kind of feature, the green feature, again to that network of souls. They are now able to love green and to embrace green. So that bring green, and then I become a little emotional about it.
But you also have to
So
tell us
then
why. You have to also tell us why you become emotional. Then that part was
I
also
will.
important. Yeah.
I'll finish the explanation and then I'll get there. But so when green is loved again, where he belongs, then the whole network is richer. And the whole network can stop looking at the past where something was hurt and it's still hurting, even if unconsciously, and start looking at the future. And that's when we can bring the next step together, wider. And then we can reach a new level in our humanity abilities. And we are all bigger because we brought back our part that was lost. So Bert Hellinger has a wonderful sentence to talk about this. This is, I mean, if we only remember one of his so many sentences that were brilliant, that would be the one for me. And he said that the great soul moves in only one direction, which is to bring into unity what has been separated. And isn't that what we aim at in mediation? And this is so much bigger than rationality can ever reach. This is so much more effective than a solution that needs to fit into the small part of the brain that we can already use. So when we connect to this everything that we belong to, many times we can go back to our place and stop fighting against anybody else's place. We don't need their place. We have ours. And the biggest threat, and this needs to be understood at some point, because once we are living somebody else's life, once we are so concerned about what the other person should be like or not, we are not putting time and energy into what we came to the world, to life to do. We are taking from the world our greatness because we're doing something that somebody else should be doing in our humble judgment, and we will never be as good at that something else as that person can be, because it's their place in life, not ours. So at the same time, this harmony that we can reach when we understand our place on earth is about connecting and at the same time fulfilling our unique, individual, absolutely necessary place on earth, on humankind, on the solar system.
But
So,
Gabriela,
go
you have
ahead.
first one, you have to tell us about why you get emotional at that point. The other is the discussion on the soul. Where all has the soul been discussed? Has Bert Hellinger spoken about that? Or you have done your other research and other discussions that you've been listening to. So what has been the concept of the soul? And of course, the emotional part of it.
Okay, so I'll go first to the bigger soul. But Bert Hellinger, he was a Catholic priest in his earlier life. He was a philosopher, a theologist, a pedagogist, and a priest, and a therapist. He went through war. So he was a teenager at the wartime, and he's been through a lot. But once he decided to develop the work of constellations, he kind of had to give up the Catholic Church in his life. And he was very cautious about talking about anything that looked like religion. And the reason was very clear. He could not talk religion, and please take this to a good understanding. Religion is about separation. If I believe that my religion is better than yours, whatever they are, I feel that I am chosen by God and you're not, which makes me better than you, which makes me believe that I have rights over you, and so on and so forth, and we know the rest. And all the wars that were caused by this kind of belief. That has nothing to do with God. There is no good hate. There's no blessed war. War is war. War is killing your siblings in the world, because we are all siblings. We were put here to learn how to tolerate each other, at least. Now, I'm not even getting to the point of loving your enemy. At least we need to tolerate each other, because no one gave us the power to end somebody else's life, right? So Bert Hellinger he went through war. He was very cautious about not bringing concepts where people could fit in or out. So he refused to talk about religion. But on the other hand, he had to talk about spiritual intelligence. That has nothing to do with religion. Actually, some people that have the most spiritual intelligence are atheists. They may not believe in a God that is above us, but they believe in connection. They believe in doing to others what they would have done unto them. And they act many times. Now, I'm not talking about all of them, of course, but I mean, it is, being an atheist is not incompatible, and quite the opposite. Many times it's compatible, because it kind of takes you out of boxes. And I'm not atheist. In relation to spiritual intelligence. So what Bert Hellinger wanted to say with the greater soul, we could talk about God, we could talk about Allah, we could talk about a greater force in life, in nature. We can talk about the miracle, the magic, the mystery, or we name it. It's okay. It's this something else that is so much bigger than us, that we are embedded in it, either we want it or not. And it's so beyond our understanding that we don't have a perfect name for it. So many times we give one name just within our group, and we believe that the name that another group has given may mean something different, but it means exactly the same. So this is about what he called the greater soul. And why do I get very emotional about it? I have this, since I was a kid, I rarely cry when I'm sad. Because when I'm sad, many times I'm so busy trying to make things the way that I believe I will not be sad anymore, that I just don't put energy there into crying. I don't think it's right or wrong. It's just how I function. So when I feel touched to the point of tears, and that is kind of frequent, thank God, it's because I feel, and it's also sensorial. I feel, you know, when you have goosebumps and you feel that you're being touched by something that is good. And when I remember, when I reach memories that are in my vocabulary, blessed, it makes me cry.
It's very nice. It's very nice to be able to, first of all, have those connections. I think that by itself is important. I think it's very nice to be able to feel that. I think everyone maybe can't, I don't know, but it's, I think, very important, and not to deny it. That's the important part.
Yeah. I couldn't, I wouldn't. Yeah. When I was a child, I was very, how can I say, I was very adult as a child. And this is about Constellation. I only understand it now. And I was always very focused and very, I needed to show that I was very strong. And I was, of course, normal.
But needed to show. You have to find out why that.
To show that I was strong. Yeah,
why,
that was
why?
a value in my family.
Okay.
In my family, it was not welcome to show fear or show pain, or and then when I grew up and I learned, actually, that is a crazy story. I went to a lecture about iridology, the study of the iris of the eye. Mm-hmm. So my eyes are very dark, so you cannot see anything there except the blackness. But if you have the right equipment, you can see the design that your iris has. And there are different types. And the different types of iris talk about not only physical aspects. So if you have a problem in your lungs, it somehow maps in your iris. If you have problems in your kidneys, it's a different kind of signal in your iris. So the iris are a map of your body, your soul, everything. But the type of design that it makes talks a lot about your psychological style. That is a theory, of course. But then I watched this lecture, and intellectually understanding what the person was saying, the person was a doctor, a medical doctor that studied it for a long time. And I said, oh, I am this kind. I don't remember the name, but it meant that this kind of person that carries the world like Hercules, carries the world in its back, and it's always up to the task and never complains and goes on no matter what, blah, 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 blah. I said, okay, that's who I am. I recognize myself there. And then I decided to pay for a consultation and do the equipment stuff, the examination. And for my great surprise, I found out I was a flower. That is the name of the shape. It looks like the petals of a flower. And I said, oh, that's me. Is that me? No. And then the doctor explained me further about the characteristics of a flower. And I was like, I am a flower. That is incredible. And one of the characteristics of the flower is the very sensible, emotional, how can I say that this being touched by what is sensitive, by what is sensible, by what is fragile, by what is beauty and and love and all these kind of things that the other one who carries the world doesn't have time to reach to. And I said, well, and then I started noticing that in myself. It wasn't, maybe it was my first self-awareness click. And then I was already an adult, 30 something years old. And then I started a deep process of self-knowledge, of self-diving. And I discovered so much about myself. And I opened up myself to this kind of emotional reaction, and letting myself be touched by the good in people. And it became also a mediation tool for me as a mediator and a constellator. I know when I'm touching the person because I feel it in my own energy. And this is not about being, it has nothing to do with magic or superpowers of anything. It's only about self-knowledge. I started to look at myself and my reactions to the different stimulation from the outside world, so that I could look at my own map and understand what is in there that is connected to me. And of course, and this is also something about constellation, if I am in a given situation, either being a mediator or a lawyer or a dentist or the garbage man or a sister or someone that is passing by in the street and sees something happen, if that is happening in my life, is because somehow it's related to me. At some level, I connect to that event in that moment, in that place, and I'm not there by chance. I don't believe in chance. I believe in a perfect network of energies, of information that is always there for us, but most of the time we don't see. So if I
Gabriela,
see it in myself, I see it in the other. Go ahead.
but Gabriela, have you ever studied the aspect that everything has already been written? Everything that is going to happen has been written somewhere about us. Have you looked at that aspect? Because there is a concept of that also.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that. I wouldn't go there. If everything was set, why be here in this world with so much suffering still necessary? I would be doing better things if I knew everything that was going to happen, especially the lottery.
Because I tell you, there are places in India where people go, and just the fact that they have walked into that place at that point of time has been written, that they will walk into this place at that point of time, and it's written in certain on palm leaves and all. So that will be taken out, and everything about that person will be told to that person, down to such details which they could never even think. And if they note it down, because no one normally believes this, but if they note it down and they look back at it, they actually, I'm telling you about someone's experience. I've never gone there, but someone has told me that the details that they got was so minute that you could never even think that all that is there. So there is this whole concept of that also, which exists, at least in India. I don't know whether other parts of the world we have such things somewhere, but it's all there. It's all written there, and it's all lying there.
Great. So I understand that it happens in Brazil as well, and I think all over Earth, because human beings have this wish to know the future, as if this, quote, knowledge would protect us from dangers and would bring us to the exact paradise that we have always dreamed of. But what I talk about is not this deterministic, how can I say, this deterministic view of life. It's more about the understanding that I am exactly where my choices led me to. So I have free will. We all have free will at some point, in some level. We don't have an infinite free will as we think. And this is again about constellation, because we didn't come to this life from point zero. We came to this life in a family, in a biological family, in an adoptive family, in a very destructured family. Doesn't matter. We came to this world through other people that lived before and that built a way to the point where we reached. And we got this life with all this background, with all this rich cloud of information already available to us. So the why we got exactly to that family at that moment, at that place, blah, 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 that of course affects who we are in this life. This is a given at that point when we are born. And of course, when we are born, we don't have enough rationality, only instincts, until a certain point where we can start to understand who we are, differentiate us from the environment, from our mother first, and from other people. And then at teenage, we believe that the world is ours and everything is about us. And then we learn that this is not exactly like this. And then we learn how to be okay with the life that was given to us and we built from after that, and so on. So our path in one lifetime, of course, is affected, I'm not saying determined, but affected by everything that came before and everything that is around. But we have some kind of freedom of choice that we exercise, more or less. We have more choice. The more we know ourselves and we can understand what is us and what is the environment, the more free we are to make choices that are really ours and not from outside in, right? So these small glimpses of freedom that we have according to everything that came before and around us builds our future every second. So if I make a choice now, for example, if I say, no, I won't talk to Vikram this morning because I prefer to go to the beach, it's a beautiful day outside, or I prefer just to be in bed and relax a little bit. And what am I choosing? In detriment of what? What am I losing? Because every choice means that you're losing something. And we are supposed to make the choices for the most benefit and the less cost. But this is only rational, and most times it's not how we actually do. And we are not aware of the other choices that we could have if we were more conscious, more at the present.
So Gabriela, what is the situation? Going out to the beach in this beautiful weather or talking to Vikram? What is the, which was the better choice?
Well, I choose Vikram every time I have a chance.
Good. At least, yeah, that makes me feel good. Although I'm sure the beach was nice, I'm sure the weather is good. So good you made that choice. Not that you didn't have an option. Gabriela, you didn't have an option.
I'm very happy with it. I'm very happy with this choice.
But Gabriela, I'm telling you that there is definitely, I'm sure you've done more reading on the soul, and that part of it, you are not telling us more about that. I'm sure there is more to that, which you will tell us, I'm sure, at some point of time. But what about the whole concept of some people having recollections of afterlife, that of the previous life? Has that ever come up in your discussion somewhere?
That has nothing to do with constellation, but I also love this other subject. But it's important to make a little connection. I say little because I don't want to go too deep.
Why I ask you all these things is because I just feel that Gabriela has studied everything. and she'll put a theory to everything. So that's why I ask.
Well, I don't know if that is good or bad, but anyway, I study a little bit of everything and I know as much as I can about everything, but it's very far from everything. So in Constellation, many times when we and I actually didn't explain yet how it works operationally, because no matter how much I explain, people will only understand once they have gone through it. So,
although let me tell you, I did watch a video of Constellation being done in some Brazilian court. So it was quite interesting. There was some man and this person tells someone from whoever sitting there, you come, you represent this person, you represent this person. And the people, one of them got emotional. I mean, really emotional. This was supposed to be people who've just been picked up from there. Well, that was very interesting.
It is. We will have one concrete experience, okay?
Yeah.
We will set a time to give you a concrete experience in a constellation, and then you put it live, okay?
Yeah, that'd be good.
Because it's the only way. I mean, it's not possible to really grasp the magnitude of this experience only with already the little boxes that we already have in our intellectual possibilities. But so coming back to afterlives, many times in a constellation, we have, for example, the representative of the client being green, and the representative of the mother of the client, say, or the grandmother, or the great grandmother, and so on. Let's start by the supposition that the mother is not alive anymore, just the client is alive. So what is represented here in this white little person is not the mother who is deceased, is the representation of the mother that is still living in that person's field, in that person's life, what still plays a role in the complex equation that leads to this person's behavior. You understand? So Bert Hellinger had a very interesting sentence that is rarely understood. He said that only the dead are complete. So if someone had their own life, lived everything that had to be lived, the good and the bad, the beautiful and the ugly, everything, and the person died, it ended a cycle. This person is supposed to be resting in peace forever and ever. Okay, Catholic view of it. But if the cycle has not been ended, and then we have to have a concept that only love is real. Only love is what we are meant to be. We are meant to live. So if someone dies, leaving loose strings all over the family, leaving hurt feelings all over the family, and these scars in these other members of the family are still open and bleeding, symbolically, the person who died will probably be remembered without good feelings for a long time, right? So coming back to a symbolic language, please. I'm not talking about the body and the soul of that ex-human being, ex because not alive anymore. So this person will be remembered, playing a role, affecting living beings. And it is this affection, these consequences of that deceased person's life that comes into play in a constellation. And many times when the person who is gone is very dearly loved, so it's natural that if we love someone, we will miss that person. But there is a limit to grief. So, for example, my father and my mother are both deceased. I miss them every day. Of course, I would love if I could have them physically by my side and have dinner with them at least once a week and talk to them every day on the phone. Of course, I miss it. But I understand, and this is not an easy task. It was not an easy task for me, especially how they did their passing. My mother was literally from night to the morning. It was a shock for everybody. I had a period of deep grief where I was hurt by life, where that suffering was bigger than all the good memories that I had. But with time, I could overcome this, how can I say this very deep pain, and the good memories overcame the pain.
But how old were you at that time?
Sorry?
How old were you at that time when she passed away?
When my mother passed away, I was 39. But I felt like an orphan anyway.
Yeah, obviously.
So it was 11 years ago. So I can look, I can feel her close to me in a good way. I can thank her for the good things that she did so that I could be myself, that I could have this place in life and I could develop my choices. So it's a way of living with the memories that let her rest in peace. She's not owing me anything. She's just there with her good and her bad, because of course she was not perfect. Of course I was hurt by her inevitably, because we're always hurt by mothers. Mothers are the only unanimity on earth. If something happened in a bad way, it was always the mother, if either because the mother did or because the mother didn't do. So and being a mother makes me understand even deeper this reality. It's kind of funny when we talk like that, but it's very complicated most of the time. But I can, as an adult that I am, as someone who loves her deeply, I can look at the thinking pile in a much clearer way than the demanding pile. Now, after a lot of constellation in my life. So when we constellate in relation to someone, I mean, when we constellate first, we have no idea what will show up in the field. No idea. This is not intellectually driven. Because if it was intellectually driven, it would take us to the same places that we have visited before and didn't solve our problems. That's why we need these sensorial tools to help people who are not affected by memories, who don't have this script, who don't have these preconcepts, reach out into other kinds of connection tools. They are sensorial. That's why when you saw the constellation on a video, you saw people who had no knowledge of that person's life, feeling emotional and many times saying full sentences that were just what that represented person would have said in that situation. So this has nothing to do with mediunity. It has nothing to do with guessing. It has nothing to do with scripts. It has to do with sensorial stimuli that anybody can feel. Anybody. So, and that the beauty of it is you bring someone who has no knowledge, and exactly because of this no knowledge, this person is more free to get in touch with information that are not his or hers. And that's why the representative brings such rich information, because it's untouched by judgment. And once the client, the constellated person, sees that story of his own life developing in front of him without any intellectual interference, it is unavoidable to just say, oh my God, I never thought of this angle of that situation. All the stories that I told myself throughout my life that had the filter, the lenses of my intellectuality, that were by its turn built by my mind to protect myself from those monsters that I put in the closet when I was a child. So in order to sleep in a room which closet is full of monsters, the child needs to tell herself a story about being a hero that will defeat the monsters, or about being a monster himself, so that his parents can be free to be the heroes. The child is always in this extreme symbolisms. So either the child is the hero or the monster, or the savior, which is again the hero, or the victim. So in this triangle of forces, the victim, the hero, and the monster, the offender, the child will make up a story to live with the difficult situation that at that point he's not sophisticated enough to look clearly into and really solve the problem. And then we grow up bringing these stories to a more adult vocabulary, to a more adult scenario, and all the costumes and everything, but it's still the same story. And in order to bring the monster out of the closet into the room and look at the monster in the eye and say, now I can see you, now I can love you, now I can integrate this part of me that was lost in the closet for a long time. This person needs many times the benefit of the exemption of prejudgment of other people, the freedom of non-judgment that the other people bring to the methodology is essential for the client to feel that the monster is in the room, and that he can now not only see the monster, but love the monster and see the beauty in it.
Interesting. Always interesting. Gabriela, that's the best part. There will always be something interesting. But what are we doing? I mean, in terms of the constellation that you actually want to do, whom do we need some people in that? How are you going to work this out?
We can do in many ways. We can have the constellation with a group that doesn't know the client and will act as a representative to the parties, the parties of the system. Or we can do individually. when I do, and that's my way of doing, other constellators can do in different ways. When I do an individual constellation, so it's just me and the client, like you and me here, I use a little visual tool, which is a very, very, very simple, basic PowerPoint that where I locate the co-location of the members of the group that need to be represented. But I do that without the client knowing who is who. So I write down to myself, for example, depending on the situation that is brought up, I listen, I make very, very few questions. The least I know intellectually, the best. I need to know a little bit so that I can place the necessary, the essential members of the system. But it has to be very, very small so that we don't pollute it here and build thicker lenses to look at the situation. And then when I listen a little bit for the client and I write down a little list of represented elements, then I ask the client to bring in some of the symbols to put in the field, co-locating without knowing who's who. So it's unconscious. And then I ask the client to put himself, and many times I ask the client to have papers in the room and have space in a very private room. You cannot be with your family going back and forth. So then I ask the client to place the paper, we call it anchors, on the floor and step over one paper in relation and look at the others and tell me how it feels. And then go to the other place and tell me how it feels and so on. So the client starts to build a sensorial list of perceptions without the interference of judgment. And then at some point, when the client has visited all these places and has registered in the own body this sensorial information, and then I tell the client who is who, and we start connecting and making the possible harmonization, if harmonization is to be made, because many times we stop at the diagnosis phase. So the first thing we do after we have this understanding of how each member of the system is feeling, the first step is to build a diagnosis, to understand what is misplaced or what has been excluded. That is always the question. What is out of place or what is out of the visual possibility of the system, so excluded. And then once we know it, it may be enough, because in practice, it is the client who will go to the world, to his own life, and make better decisions because of a better map. The constellation will give you a clearer map of your own life and your own system. If you're going to walk throughout the territory or not, it's up to you. So either we stop at the point of the diagnosis, or we go a little further into a possible harmonization of the field. And this is also done sensorially. Of course, we start from the orders of love, as Bert Hellinger said. There are the 3 basic laws that we spoke last time that regulate the functioning of every living system. So through the orders of love, we may do one better vision of the system into harmony, or not. It then depends on many things. And different constellators can do it in different ways, always for a good reason. So you always find the good constellation, the good constellator for you. And then, which is also very common, getting more and more common in Brazil, is when we have constellation as a first diagnosis for different specialities. So for example, it's common to have a client coming into constellation with his or her therapist, or a doctor, or a lawyer. So the doctor, the lawyer, the therapist will come to observe the constellation and then use the constellation experience into therapy, into whatever medical specialization, the treatment. And what will come up in a constellation, of course, if you have, let's say, diabetes, if you're diabetic, God forbid, why is your body not processing sugar in the proper way? Why don't you deal with sugar in a good way? And then I'll give you one simple example. For example, in a constellation, we will not look at your pancreas, we will not look at your blood cells, we will look at your relationships. But eventually, we will find out that your mother had such a hard life, she had to work so much to bring food to the table, that first, sweets were not allowed. Second, sweetness didn't have a room in the family. So dealing with sweetness makes your system shake, because it's innovation, and because it makes you fear that you won't belong in that family anymore, because that family is not about sweetness, it's about survival, hard survival, which was necessary then but may not be anymore. Because of her, your mother's effort, you were able to have a better life and to bring sweetness to the table of your children. So
But this was this was an actual situation, or this was just a hypothetical thing that you were saying?
it is a current situation, but it's never a one size only
Because,
to everybody. But
because
it is a possible actual situation.
Because
Yes.
when you're speaking about it, it seems like you've actually either done something like this and you've seen this result or something like that. That's the way I gauge it. I don't know.
It is a good example, I would say. So we have much more powerful. We are much more powerful. We have much more power over the things that happen in our lives than we believe. For example, let's take this example of sugar. If you, as a child, learned that the way your mother could provide would need to exclude sugar, if you are addicted to sugar, if you are willing to have sugar in your life, it's like you're betraying your mother's possibility. You are making your mother ashamed of being less great than she was. So many people block their own possibilities so that they don't feel that they are overgrowing their parents. And the ironic side of it is that everything that a parent, a healthy parent, because then there can be other situations, but everything that a parent wants is that his or her child will shine much more than we could. Everything that I do is for my daughter to be better than I am, because my mother also did a lot more than she had to me, so that I could be more than she could, and so on. And that's how humanity evolves. But none of this is conscient. And the feeling of belonging is much, much stronger then our instinct of evolution. We don't evolve without belonging, but we can evolve and belong at the same time. And that's what we look for in a conflict resolution or in a constellation. And many times doing them together. So once we free people from their own limitations imposed by themselves, once they understand that the limitation is not outside, it's inside, and inside they are the powerful ones to make a different decision now, then they can go there to the world, to the territory, and have a better path and walk faster and walk to the right destination, the destination where they can be the best of themselves.
Okay, so now I need to find a client for us for the constellation. That's what I need to do.
You can be the client.
No, I'm going to be an observer only. I will observe.
Okay.
But
I understand.
So we'll find a client and then we'll do it. But okay, now what is happening is that, of course, Tuesday you are going to be part of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
That, I mean, of course, you said you have an hour only. So whatever. And then in April, what I'm doing is I'm actually having a symposium on heart, soul, and spirituality. So I need your time for that. We can work out
When
anytime.
will it be?
Hmm?
When will it be?
It's throughout April. Look, what I do normally is I just keep, it starts with, I'll keep one day for it, every 1 day a week. Then what happened in the last symposium was that 1 day became 2 days. It was supposed to be in the evenings on 1 day. It became the entire day on 1 day and the entire day on the second day. So that's how we reached 100 people in 2 months. It was supposed to be 1 month. Then it became 2 months. So that's how it grows. But it has to start somewhere. So I've started talking to people, telling them, I haven't put it out right now. I'll put it out on a post maybe. But I mean, I just wanted to collect it into a symposium because that way there's some connectivity between sessions. So I need your time for that.
Okay, my pleasure. And on April 13th at night here, so it will be the middle of the night for you, but already on the 14th, I'll have a big life with 5 or 6, depending on the agenda. There's only one that is still to confirm. Judges. There are leading constellation projects inside the judiciary throughout Brazil. Mm-hmm. So Brazil is the pioneer of the introduction of constellation in the judiciary and in the public health system. So that would be interesting. Unfortunately, it has to be in Portuguese. But what I'm trying to do, and I'm trying to find someone who knows the technology, is to have it live streaming on YouTube with immediate subtitles in English. I know there is a software to do that, but I'm struggling to find someone who can deal with it. So if that happens, I'll let you know as well, if I can do that translation immediately, because it would be lovely to have people interact from the whole world and make questions to the judges in lifetime. Yeah.
Perfect. But what I'm doing on the 14th is, this is in March. I'm doing a discussion on Socrates and mediation.
Wow.
So please, if you want to be part of that, please join us. This is on, what did I say? On the 18th of March.
Okay.
But that's at 5:30 India time. So, because I did one on Mahatma Gandhi and mediation. So I am doing a part 2 of that. So what I've stopped doing is I've stopped putting posts out on that, asking people. I did put a post for the Mahatma Gandhi and mediation on calling for speakers, but I haven't put out one for Socrates. I should put it out. So
yeah, please. I love that.
So you're going to be part of that? Yes?
Hopefully.
I think what I need to do is, after cutting this live stream, I have to get you to open your calendar and then put all these dates there. So
That is a good idea.
okay,
I'd
yeah.
love that.
Okay, so okay, obviously interesting discussion and to be continued in the symposium. But in the symposium, maybe a little different, maybe. Or I don't know how you want to put it because the symposium sessions, I want them to be actually 1 hour each to condense
Uh-huh.
it into that. So because otherwise, okay, these conversations, I enjoy these conversations. It's like my living room conversation. But there, I want it to be something which then gets circulated and people watch it a little more because 1 hour seems to be something that people might watch. Our 2 hour
Yeah.
sessions, I don't know how many people would watch, but I don't care. I really don't care. I enjoy these conversations. I go with it. So, but anything, a concluding remark that you want to give on the larger heart, soul, and spirituality and mediation? Anything on that? Just a
In just one sentence, these topics are inevitably connected, and they're happening all at the same time in our lives. And once we reach a conflict, is because something is willing to be seen, is ready to be seen, and and we are developing the methodologies to make it faster, easier, less painful as possible.
perfect. But I need more discussions on the soul part of it. I don't think we've touched that enough. That
Next time.
connection between souls and look, it's similar. I mean, concept is what you're talking about, that connection in that sense. But maybe a little more on that. We'll maybe elaborate on that, get more discussions going on that. So, Gabriela, again, thank you very much. Another wonderful
Thank you.
session. You're not
My
going anywhere.
pleasure.
Yeah, you're not going anywhere. Let me just stop the live stream and then we're back.